Something I've realized is there isn't a lot of resources for online Christian creators, like content creators. Of course, there's a few, like Kenta Jandra has a page and paid community. But in this video, I will cover 5 tips that I wish I knew when I started Christian content creation a year ago. This isn't your standard SEO, this isn't your standard video editing tips or talk to camera tips, but these are 5 tips tailored towards Christian content creators in specific. It's not that those things like scripting and hashtags and like talk to camera aren't important, but YouTube and other online sources are full of information about those, but somewhat empty about information about Christian content creation. So no matter who you are, whether you're just starting Christian content creation, or if you've been running a page for a while, or running multiple pages for a long time, these tips can still be applicable to you. These are the exact tips that I wish I knew when I started creating Christian content a year ago. First off, you need to let God speak through you and work through you as you create your content. Holy Spirit speaks through missionaries and through pastors, and it's the exact same for Christian content creators. Exodus 4:12 says, "Now therefore go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." And also 1 Corinthians 2:13 tells us that we are to preach based on not our own wisdom, but what God has put in our mouths to speak. We need to let God speak through us, write scripts through us, edit videos through us, make thumbnails for videos through us, respond to comment through us. We need to let God do all those things through us, not by our own ability, not getting prideful. I can do it all on my own, because you can't. Before I do anything, whether it's recording, editing, scripting, I always pray that God would work through me and I wouldn't get prideful of my own ability, trying to do it all on my own. But let God do it all through me, and that would simply be his vessel. We cannot get prideful, thinking that we can do it all on our own, because we can't. We need to let God do the work through us so we can't do the work on our own. Secondly, we need to rejoice in all sharing of the gospel. Actually, this is something I really struggled with at the start of my content creation, and only recently have I started dealing with it, but that issue still isn't gone in my walk as a Christian content creator. Well, what do I mean by this? Stop caring about the numbers. 1 view equals 1 person, 1 seed planted in someone for the gospel. Imagine a room of 200 people who are there listening to you preaching the gospel to them. That's the exact same scene that you should imagine whenever you get 200 views, because that's the exact same thing that happens. You preach the gospel to 200 people whenever you get 200 views on a video. So you do not care about the numbers. After a year of creating content, I still get 100 view videos, even 10 or 20 views sometimes. But I haven't given up, because 100 people reached with the gospel is better than 0 people reached with the gospel. Hold on, sorry, my recording light went out. Let me charge it back up. If your intention with this is to make money or to get famous, your heart is not in the right spot for you to create Christian content online. Your intention with this should be to share the gospel, and everything else is a bonus. You can get famous from this, you can make money from this, but don't let that fame consume you. Don't let that money consume you. And use the fame and money that you do get to point people to God, and not to glorify yourself, and not to destroy your walk with Jesus, and not to destroy your mission. Your goal with this should be to share the gospel to as many people as possible, no matter if it's 1 view or 1 million views, 1 person reached or 1 million people reached. No matter how much success you get as a Christian content creator, you need to attribute all of that success to God. You never get any of the views on your own, so you can't claim them as your own, that they're of your own work. Even if you aren't a Christian creator, God still gave you the breath to speak with. God still gave you another day to be able to record that video. He gave you an internet connection to be able to create that. So you need to attribute all the success to God. A great example of someone who actually isn't even a Christian content creator, but gives all the credit to God, is Kai Cenat. He's a streamer, and as he would And all the time, he's always talking about how Jesus is the one who helps him as he creates content. It's not by his own ability, as he talks about. And even in his retirement announcement, as he was doing his final stream, he was still praising God and saying that without Jesus Christ, there would be nothing, none of his career would have ever happened. So we need to have the same mindset. Even if you're a Christian creator, you need to still give all the credit to God. Every like, every share, every comment should not be given to yourself for you to store up on this earth where moth and rust come to steal and destroy, but they should all be given to God, not yourself. Never get prideful saying, I did this, but always say God did this. First off, in your internal monologue, how you speak to yourself, how you think in your mind, but also as you put something out there publicly, as you speak in front of people, or as you create a video. I actually have a video pinned on all my profiles explaining how I do not claim any of the views, likes, or anything for myself, but they're all for Jesus. So maybe you want to do a similar thing to that. As Christian creators, we need to discover the role that God has for us, that God's created us for, and focus on that role or those roles that He has for us and nothing else. God may have you as a seed planter, just sprinkling a little bit of Jesus on people's feeds. Maybe God has you here as a seed sower, bringing people who are open to Jesus along their journey to salvation. Maybe God has you as the one bringing people to salvation, taking people who are ready to be saved and teaching them how to be saved. Maybe God has you here as someone who helps existing Christians on their sanctification process. Maybe God may have you here as someone who destroys stereotypes of Christians. A big stereotype that's all around is that Christians just hate anyone who aren't like them. LGBT, anyone like that. But that couldn't be further from the truth. We're here to show love to these people, and so maybe your role here is to break down the stereotypes of hatred and show love to people as a follower of Jesus. Or maybe God could have you here for multiple roles, or one of these that, like, I listed out a couple of different roles, but that's not all the roles that God may have you here for. That God might have you here for a role that I didn't even think of, honestly. Just spend time in prayer that God would guide you to the role or roles that God has you here for, creating content as a Christian content creator. And once you find that role that God created you for, do not stray away from that role. If you are a seed planter, don't worry about how many people are being brought to salvation. God and all the people that God has put in place as seed reapers are the ones who need to be worrying about that. But you as a seed planter, if that's your role, you don't need to be worrying about how many people are being brought to salvation. All you have to worry about is that you're doing your job as a seed planter. If you're someone who guides people who are open to Jesus to the point where they're ready for salvation, don't worry about all the lost people who don't want to follow Jesus, because God hasn't instructed you to worry about the lost people who don't want Jesus, but He's put you here to help the people who are open to the idea of Jesus but don't know how to start that relationship. It's kind of like if you got a job in the finance department of Microsoft, you wouldn't worry about what's happening in the marketing department of Microsoft, because that's not what you were hired to worry about. And it's the same exact thing with our role that God has given us. God has given us a specific role, so we don't need to be worrying about anything else. Of course, we can pray that these people who are lost in our comments, we can pray for them, but we can't force anybody. I used to look at all the comment sections full of people saying, oh, God isn't real, oh, Jesus was a liar. I wish I could help them to be saved. I still do, but I've realized that I'm simply a seed planter, so I've stopped stressing about the people that God needs to work in. I'm glad that I planted seeds in them, but I'm not worrying about not worrying about those people so much so that it distracts me from my role. I hope that made sense, but finally, you cannot save everyone. Not everyone is open to the idea of following Jesus, and that's just something we have to live with. You shouldn't try super hard to save someone or bring them to salvation if they aren't ever going to be saved. There are some people who will just go to hell. There's nothing we can do to change their mindset. Of course, yes, do everything you can to bring someone to salvation if that's what God's guiding you to do. But sometimes you've already done as much as you possibly can, and you just need to give God the situation. You can't save everyone. Matthew 10:14 says, "And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet, and when you leave that house or town." So Jesus here is saying, like, bro, you don't have to try to save everyone. Because if they don't accept you, okay, just move to someone and see who might accept Jesus. We're here to guide people, we're here to plant seeds, but we can't force anyone to follow Jesus. So don't worry about the hate commenters. Instead of getting caught up on all those people who aren't going to be saved anyway, focus on guiding people who are open to knowing Jesus on that path of what they really need to do instead of forcing people. We can't force anyone to follow Jesus, so instead of wanting to force a hate commenter to follow Jesus, instead pray for them. This has been a crazy complex video, especially those last 2 points. So I hope and pray that first off you understood this video and that it helped you somehow, some way as a Christian content creator trying to spread the gospel online. If even one person watched this video and gained one tiny piece of value, that is a win in my book and in God's eyes. And with that, peace out and God bless.